Yeah, then somebody called him.
यही सब कर रहा था
That's right.
और जो फर्स्ट सेशन में 3 और पूरा एक जो कोई भाव और इसका इतने पेपर आ जाएंगे सच्ची दो चार मेरे मैसेज तो बस इसमें मुझे देखा एक चीज़ को आगे जल्दी से दो बार मैसेज भेजे मुझे मेरे तो देखो एक्सटर्नल करने तो वैसे भी ले लेता अगर गाइड लेना है और एक
A very good morning to everyone present. We are delighted to welcome you all for the session on the art of publishing in top journals by Professor Saurabh Bora. Professor Saurabh Bora is an associate professor of marketing at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, with a PhD in marketing from IIM Bangalore. Professor Bora's research focuses on firm level strategy, particularly in international marketing strategy, strategic marketing, and business strategies within emerging markets. His work has been published in esteemed journals like the Journal of International Business Studies, Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, Journal of International Marketing, and the Journal of Business Research. Before embarking on his academic journey, Professor Bora gained valuable industry experience in the automobile and banking sectors. We are deeply honored to have Professor Bora with us today, bringing their wealth and knowledge and expertise to this event. Please join me in welcoming Professor Bora to the stage and Professor Sanket Patavla to felicitate Professor Bora as a token of our appreciation and gratitude.
which not everyone has. निकल जाते हैं देखता भी नहीं तो ये काम कर तो वो ना इसने बोला और मस्ट टीच भी हाँ हाँ इम्पोर्टेंट है कि बैक पेन काम करने को भी आ रही
So, thank you for attending this session. I'm Saurabh Bora, and very kind introduction by Sanket. And let me just kind of talk about this idea of publishing in top journals. So, briefly about me. Most of you are here. 4 or 5 years back, I was also on the other side of the table. So, I have never studied in the United States. Know very few people in the United States. In fact, I come from a northeastern part of the country here, and many of them people may not know where my hometown is. Okay, so that's where we started. My journey started as a scholar, and like an Indian scholar, I have the significantly similar challenges, a lot more similar to what you guys may be facing. Okay, so I want to kind of try to make it a little bit more how I approach research and the challenges I face and how I move forward. I will use this one if that's all required. So this person is V. Kumar, whom I met in a doctoral consortium. At that time he was a Journal of Marketing chief editor. Okay, when I met him, and that I think was a significant breakthrough because one of the things I realized that you need to talk to big scholars to understand what gets through and what doesn't get through. Okay, so because I was not aware of those, so that's one thing that happened. That I always always try to reach out to scholars who have published in top journals. Okay, so that's what I realized because they can actually give you feedback, and most of the time their feedback is to kind of say that your research is not worth it, which is good. Which is good because rather than realizing after 3 years that your research is not worth it, if somebody can tell you at the beginning that it's not a good paper, you can shut it down immediately or improve it, move forward from there. That's one. Second, other thing about publishing in top journal, which is a softer aspect, is that I always work with my friends, and I have rarely worked with people who are not my friends. Okay, so two of them I always keep their photographs here. My permanent co-authors. Okay, so one is Amresh, who is now in Texas A&M University. The another is Anirban, who is now Dean Faculty at IIM Udaipur. So almost all my work they are the co-authors. Okay, one of them will be there. So this helps me to kind of navigate the challenges. So one of the challenges with top publications is that you have to handle multiple rounds of reviews. And when you multiple rounds of reviews, if you do not have people who are close to you, and if you do not have time to handle it, you may lose out on them. So for example, my first Journal of International Business Studies paper went through 5 rounds of revision. Okay, and after round 3, all of us, actually I was feeling that it's better to recall the paper because it's such a terrible paper, right? Why will somebody give you 5 rounds of review? It has to be really bad. But we continued, and one of them persisted, somebody said do it, so that's very important, okay? That you need to have people, peers, and peers also help with one more thing, which is basically they are equally hungry. You need paper and they need paper, right? I always tell my doctoral students this, okay? I always tell them that you should be the one driving the project, not me. Because you need the paper and I don't. Okay? So my hunger has relatively came down, but you need to publish, so everybody who is an assistant professor at the doctoral level, they always be more forceful towards publication as compared to somebody like me who is at the associate professor level, right? So for us publication is good, but it doesn't make or break our career. We did what we are supposed to do. For doctoral students, it's a make or break in terms of career. Now, having said that, now kind of that we just start. Is there a place where this has to be pointed? That's so let me just kind of delve right into it. So one of the questions that I significantly keep on getting that why do you even bother about publication? Because if you just look at India, the geography and kind of institutes we have, although we make a big fuss about publication, all of us who work in assistant professor, associate professor level knows that publication is one of the other things that we do. There are multiple other stuff like teaching, like admin, clicking photographs and talking to ministry and blah blah blah, everything, right? And then among those 10, 15 things, publication is one thing, right? Yeah, so one can argue that probably this is not very important. One of the things I realized that with publication you can actually quickly move ahead of the curve. What I say ahead of the curve, that you can get promoted very quickly. That's one big advantage. Number 2, if you are in a small institute and want to jump to a larger institute, that helps. If you want to get grants, that helps. So all these things where you can actually move ahead of the curve, academic publication can do for you. The second thing I always say that this is something is my motivation. That time comes in your career where you start thinking that am I doing something substantial that gives my life some kind of a meaning. That you can also say midlife crisis. So to resolve your midlife crisis, publication is a great way, because the point is you feel, it doesn't matter who others feel or not, you do feel that you are solving issues which have real significance value to the world, right? Others might say, I don't know what this guy is doing, he keeps on talking about some paper, doesn't make any sense, but the point is for you, it has got a meaning, right? So this helps you in terms of solving some important issues. So that is definitely another thing that I look at. Third is, of course, you go beyond the average teacher. So what happens is that when you get into publication, you bring some of this research to your classroom, and that gives you a lot of conviction, and your students get very fresh knowledge. So if you look at how the entire knowledge domain works in management at least, so first the paper gets published, then it will be applied by somebody, hopefully, and then after 5-10 years you will get a book out of it. So once the books come out, right, you are already 10 years late in terms of knowledge that has been created. Okay? So if you are publishing and if you are doing research, you can bring the fresh research to your classroom immediately. So as a teacher also, it kind of helps to kind of create your niche. And of course, it is obviously about striving for excellence. Now in terms of academic paper, right, I have tried to develop this idea that I don't look at the paper as one single piece, but I look at multiple amalgamation of multiple sections. So I'm going to just kind of go slowly about this. So I generally say there are 6 major components to any research. Okay, so the first component is of course introduction and motivation. Okay, and this is probably the most important component in any top journal, because I review for a lot of top journals, and I can tell you most of the reviewers are like me only. So we generally get a month to review a paper. First 28 days we don't do anything, because we have better things to do in life rather than reading the paper, right? At 28th day, we are going to get a reminder from the journal. You have 2 days to go for your review submission. Now you are middle of a lot of things, right? And you have to realize now, my goodness, I have to review this paper. And I don't know anything about the paper. So we will pick up the first thing we look at. First thing is the motivation of the paper. Is the paper even worth reading? Okay, worth reading. And I'm going to tell you what a good motivation means. See, many of the time, and which is the problem I notice in many academic scholars, they say their motivation is nobody has done this work before. There is a gap in literature. Okay, exceptionally bad motivation to have. Okay, if there is a gap in literature, there can be only 2 reasons why that gap exists. Number 1, I don't want to do it, because otherwise somebody must have done it by now, right? It's why in the entire world nobody considered that problem. Secondly, it is impossible to do. Okay, that means the impossibility arises sometimes because of the data unavailability. You know that the gap exists, but you can't do anything about it because you don't have the data, and nobody in the world has data. Okay. Now the second problem, if you can solve, great. Okay, but the first problem, if it is not solved because it's not an important problem, then you will get into this huge issue of trying to solve a problem which is not important at all. So my litmus test that I apply is number 1, I need a phenomena which is broad enough. Okay, I am not going to solve a small problem. So if I see broad enough, that means it should have a larger implication for the firm, number 1. Okay. Number 2, that is my litmus test, is that it should be practically important. Okay, that means the practitioner should find it interesting, not me. Okay, practitioner should find it interesting. And the third one, it should be counterintuitive. That people forget. Okay, that people forget. This should be counterintuitive. The moment I look at a problem, I always see, can I answer the problem without doing any research? Okay, and that a very senior scholar long back told me that good researchers are extremely lazy. Okay, you have to be extremely lazy to say that I don't want to solve any problem. I solve a problem. Can I answer it without doing any research? If I can, I do not have a problem at all. Okay, so in many cases you will see once the paper is done, right? Most of the time you will see, oh, I can say what he is doing, he or she is doing, before even going to the paper. Okay, that's a bad paper. That will never make it to a top journal. Okay, but if it is counterintuitive, I cannot predict. Okay, can you think of an example which you cannot predict? I was thinking about it, right? For example, what you cannot predict, that is one paper we are doing right now. All this, there are brands which are called cruelty-free brands, brands which are not tested on animals, cruelty-free brands. Now the question is, will cruelty-free brands be adopted, or brands which have a cruelty-free proposition, will they have a higher profit or lower profit? On one hand you can say they will have higher profit. Why? Well, entire social media is buzzing about. Okay, we should treat humans equally, animals equally. Everybody is saying that one hand it is definitely true, it can have higher profit. But at the same time, people think that this has to be tested on an inferior animal before you apply on your face. So that second reason also exists. So now I cannot a priori tell you which direction is correct, which direction is false. If I can a priori tell you which is the right direction, then research that topic you should not do any research. Okay, that is the first litmus test I apply. Okay, before even data, before even problem. So one of the things of that, I said that practically relevant, important, cannot be answered. Okay, a priori, that means it can go either direction, very important. Okay, and then I look at the literature. Okay, then I look at the literature. Has somebody done it before me? Okay, because there are many smart people in this world and they must have done it. They have figured out, then I do not have it. Okay, so I tell my doctoral students these days that research problems do not exist in literature, they exist in newspapers. Okay, they exist in the real world. Go out in the real world if you really want to solve a research and if you want to do impactful work. So this is the first one, okay. This is one thing, it should be generalizable. The generalizability is more of a marketing phenomena as compared to any other phenomena, so I just keep it for now, okay. Second, literature review, okay. Literature review section, one of the things that I noticed that people, because they read a lot of literature, they also want to write a lot of literature. Okay, but please be mindful, I don't have the time to read your literature. And I am the one who decides whether to accept your paper or not to accept your paper. So give me relevant literature and synthesize your literature and tell me, okay, what you are going to supposed to do. So in many papers, what I see, and that's one of the reasons for rejection, they will say, this paper said this paper said that, this paper said that. I said, very happy for all of them. Okay, but I don't want to know any of it, okay, because that's not exciting for me, who said what, okay, but can you synthesize and give me a synthesis of the argument, okay, synthesis of a literature, right, that scholars, typically young scholars, they have the problem, they don't do that, because they are reading so much, therefore they want to write everything that they know, which is basically good for them, but not for us, okay, so therefore this number one. That is copy-paste job. Second, okay, there are literature which is relevant to your research, there are literature which is irrelevant to your research. So for example, you are doing research on, let's say, any topic you like, let's say sharing economy, right? Sharing economy is a vast literature, okay, and there is some part of sharing economy that may be relevant for you. So for example, if you are looking at only performance, anything which is related to performance is relevant for you. But what is irrelevant for you is things like network effect, how this sharing economy goes, how this sharing economy happens, right? Very important to draw the boundaries that what you want to feed the reviewer. Okay? I do not have the time to go back and read everything. Many of the time, based on what you feed me, I have to invest my time, and I'll show you how to kind of make your literature much. Second, third is of course hypothesis. Okay, two critical points. We talk about intuitive versus non-intuitive. You require non-intuitive hypothesis in your paper. Okay, and if you are doing a contextual paper, you require contextual variant. Okay, so for one of the things that people forget, one of the major problems that people have is that, let's say I was looking today morning, I was pushing some people, right? You are doing research on MSME, for example. Do you have a MSME specific variant? If you don't have a MSME specific variable, that paper is not a MSME paper. Okay, it may be done in the context of MSME. Okay, but require MSME specific variable. I'm going to show you when I have done a Kirana store paper what we did. Second, literature is not hypothesis. Very important. I was very sad to read some papers which I get almost every day. I have to get tortured with this. People say this paper said this paper said this, hence this. Then I sometimes write, if everything is said in the papers, why should I read your paper? Your paper should have a conjecture. You understand the conjecture? Conjecture, that means I build a theory, I look at a theory and try to make a prediction. The prediction is based on some evidence on the literature, but not exactly the literature. Okay? If you use literature and say that A has said this, B has said this, and hence this, that means you are not building a hypothesis, you are actually narrating what has been done already. Okay, that you should not do. So this is very important. The literature is not hypothesis. Please remember, anytime you do your research, I need non-intuitive, counter-intuitive hypothesis. I hate to read intuitive hypothesis. Everybody hates to read intuitive hypothesis. Because you know already what is additional we are going to learn. Methodology I am going to talk a little bit more later. Then it comes to the idea of contribution to theory. Now, here also, there are two things people can do. One is extending a theory, and another is coming up with a new theory. The second one is much difficult. The first one is easy. Most of the papers fall in the first category. Now, when you write extending a theory or extending a literature, okay, do not repeat your findings. Most papers what I see when I go to contribution literature section, theory section, they are repeating their file. We found this, we found that, hey, I have read already what you have found. 40 pages I was reading what you have found. Now you tell me how you are extending the literature. Okay? That's very important because that's a common tendency among scholars. So this is one thing that you need to do. And then of course finally contribution to practice, which is extremely important, especially in marketing kind of. So it should have actionable insight, and if you can show impact, nothing like it. Okay? If you can show impact, nothing like it. So just to kind of highlight these 5-6 areas we need to work. Okay? So I'm going to try to show one paper of mine where we try to kind of synthesize all of this together. If possible, if I get time, we'll talk about 2 papers. But if not, then at least one paper I have to do. Now, once you go back from this session and once you kind of start doing, and if you are rethinking about what you want to do, then I'm just kind of going to present 2 different approaches to research. Okay? So one is what we call a top-down approach, which is very common in India and this kind of geography, which is say literature driven. Go back and look at the literature, collect data based on existing scales, and the problem with this kind of research is you may find it hard to differentiate. Okay? You may find it hard to differentiate. So that means there are many papers, your paper will be one of the many papers. The second one, which I call is a phenomena driven approach, which is my favorite. Okay, which is bottom up approach. So it's a phenomena driven. Okay, so that means I look at the world and I say, hey, there is a phenomena in the external world and I want to solve it. Okay, that can be a simple phenomena as Delhi pollution is very high. Okay, can I do something about it? That's a very interesting research question to explore. Okay, another interesting research question maybe some people are talking about child marriages, right? Even after so many different types of rules and regulation came in, child marriages, there is no conflict. Right? Is there a way to kind of contribute to that? That's an important phenomenon for everyone to study. So when you do a phenomena-driven approach, right, you cannot have scales. It's impossible because nobody will kind of have scales ready for you. So therefore, organization will have data, government will have some data. You have to work with whatever. Okay. So in the top-down approach, you use scales. In the bottom-up approach, you have to work with whatever you have. So therefore you need to use a lot of proxies rather than the data itself. So you have to use proxies. Here the challenge is this. Okay, here the challenge is you need to have it's what we call a legitimacy challenge. So many Western reviewers may not trust Indian data at all. Okay, so what you have to do is that when you collect data from organizations, it's very important to get their sign off. Okay, we generally submit these days a non-disclosure agreement or something, or ask them to write a letter, say that they have shared data. Somehow you need to make the paper more legitimate for them to accept. So this is basically top-down versus bottom-up. I will try to showcase my paper, which is first the bottom-up paper. This was a paper that got accepted in Journal of Academic Marketing Science. How much to digitize, understand the impact of retailers' adoption of digital technology on performance in the emerging market countries. So a large study, right? Now, first I said, right, we have to establish that this is an important problem. Okay? Why it's an important problem? Can anyone tell me? Why it's an important problem? Why should we even study this? Digital payment technology adoption in emerging market.
It's a very visible phenomenon.
It's a visible phenomena. Okay. What else? It's a visible phenomena.
Common problem faced by everyone?
Common problem faced by everyone, yeah. Okay.
There is also an impetus for
Yeah, so government is pushing for it, yeah, governments are pushing for it, you have all this. So that makes it interesting because it's a growing phenomenon, right? So just to kind of highlight the numbers, we put this idea that it's not only in India, but across different countries, right, it's important. Okay? Why do I have to put the example of Brazil, Indonesia, China for?
Emerging countries.
Exactly. You see the point? And why do I need to say emerging market and non-India?
Generalizable.
It's generalizable and it makes a much larger problem. Now it's not an India problem, it's a problem that will be faced in Bangladesh, Indonesia, everywhere else, right? Now I moved away from the problem that somebody said, yeah, your research is only India specific. I say, hell no. I'm talking about countries which consist of a large population, and they are going to be affected by my research. Okay, that's number one, okay? But then the second problem arises, still has not answered yet. Second problem is, adoption of digital technology should have an effect on farm performance, correct? And should have a positive effect on farm performance. So why should I write another paper which talks about adoption of digital payment technology and its effect on farm performance? You get my point? Any technology if you adopt as a retailer, it should affect your performance, and that's a positive, right? So before even I start the research, one can argue that I can give the result before even the research starts. Okay? So the case I make in this paper, this is the case I make. It's a very large scale study. Is that, first of all, what is special about emerging markets? That's the case I make. Okay? So it's going. But this is what the major case is. Okay? Many emerging market retailers are facing performance related issue. But these are the reasons one would argue that it may not have an effect. For example, if you have digital technology, many consumers may not have access to internet. Even today, many consumers may not. So therefore, digital technology may not use. That's one major problem. Second, even if you use, the retailer may not know how to use it. So there is a digital literacy problem that may not work. Third, which is a big problem we realize, is that if you pay by the Paytm or whatever, right, the money comes to the retailer's bank account. And many smaller retailers have one-man shop. So every day I have to go from my shop to the bank, withdraw the money, and then bring the money and pay it to my vendor, because my vendor is not digitized. Okay, so my vendor I need to pay with. So all of this implies that while at an aggregate level it might look like it has a positive impact, in an emerging market context, because of the structural properties of the emerging market or the structural challenges of the emerging market, I cannot actually predict whether this technology will have a positive or a negative effect. Right? Now I have put the case together and say, big problem, cannot answer a priority, okay, should they adopt? And the third problem, just increase the layer. There are so many different technologies. Okay, you have net banking, you have, for example, mobile payment system, the card system, so many. Which one should you adopt? Should you adopt all? Should you adopt few? Okay, that's another challenge. This is what we kind of started with, okay, this problem. So this is the first part, this current debate. Then I started putting what the literature say, and this is important, okay, I wanted to kind of showcase. So every paper of mine will have a table like this, okay. This is a table for whom? Reviewer, thank you. You don't have to read it, sir. Madam, please don't read my paper completely. Look at this table, beautiful table I have made it for you. And the sir and madam can actually look at the table. They don't need to read my paper completely, my literature review section, because I'm going to tell you what this table does. What this table does? It does two things. What is the first thing? It summarizes you the seminal work. Okay? What is the second thing?
Novelty.
It highlights where I am contributing. Okay? And that's why you see, I am saying most papers either consumer perspective or retailer perspective. Okay? I am taking a retailer perspective. And it doesn't, almost none of the papers are talking about profitability. And then also none of the papers are talking about this other stuff. Okay? One of the things very important, okay? All these columns that you put, all of this for the other papers, it should not happen that everything is low and you are only here. That's also I have seen. Everything no, okay? So then this, my goodness, we missed into the next prophet has arrived. Because till now we were prophetless. You understand? Because nobody knew and you are the only one who can come up with this. So that's bad. That shows that you are not reading the literature completely, or you are citing irrelevant papers to make your paper more relevant. What you have to show, there is some places, of course, there are people who are working. right? I take care of this, but there are aspects where people have not worked, which I also take care of. Okay? Then it means like extending the relationship, right? And so therefore be cognizant of the fact that do not say everybody know E1 or ES. Okay, that looks well. Okay, so then it comes is, we talked about this, what are our studies. Now coming to the method part, which I have not spoken yet. So I'll just kind of highlight. There are some papers which require multiple method approach. In this paper we take a multiple method approach. There is a reason for it. Our understanding of these small retailers are pretty limited. We have papers in small journals which has come, but papers are more or less replication of the work that has been done in the United States and got replicated in an Indian retailer context. And therefore it's important here to kind of have this, go and understand what exactly the challenges are. So that's why, because I don't know, and therefore I have to do a qualitative research. Now qualitative research is a nightmare. And I will tell you the challenges of qualitative research. The moment you put qualitative research as a word in your paper, I am expecting a novel finding. Okay? I am expecting a novel finding. If you do not have a novel finding, qualitative research are useless. So as soon as, that's why they call it exploratory research. Have you heard the word? Exploratory. They say exploratory, which means what? I have no damn clue what's going to come out of it. But better it comes out something which nobody knows in this way. So you have to feel, people have to be excited once the qualitative research goes on, right? And then of course you have to do empirically test, and then I'll talk about field experiment a little later. Now the idea is basically, we did a qualitative research. Okay, objective identification of benefits and challenges retailer encounter while adopting challenges. How do we do it? So 31 retailers, we approached 200. Okay, and this is basically across different geographies. So we did it like, I think I forgot, around 10-15 different states or something. Okay, this is basically the money that came from Government of India to IIM Bangalore. So this is one of the co-authors is from IIM Bangalore. And government said we did this digitization activities, right? Does it have the effect or not? And he did collect some data. So that is the data. So we did semi-structured interview. Here the challenge is some of the interviews are conducted in a vernacular language. So in Assamese, Bengali, etc. or Punjabi, and then you have to kind of again recode it back to English. So that is a process, but it's a normal process, so you go through that. And what do you find? Okay, number one. These are few things you find, okay? Retailers are not confident of the utility of digital payment technology. They don't know which one will work, which one will not. Second, digital payment technology primary issue is non-trivial amount of cost associated with the technology. They have to put money for many of them. And then some people say future it might grow, etc. This is important. These are different things that we point out. So we put that in terms of here in the finding. Then the empirical finding. Okay, so empirical study. I'll just kind of highlight this. Okay. So does adoption affect performance? Which is the first one. Should you adopt? How many should you adopt? Which two you should adopt? Are there synergistic effect between different digital technology, etc. So this is where we do the pilot study, and this is not a typical empirical study. So we did a pilot study, saw some result, saw whether it works or not. Then we did a large scale study, and and then we kind of did our different variables, independent variable, dependent variable. Okay. So here you will see that our independent variable is economic performance, which is daily average revenue, because that's all we had. It's not profit by. Okay, because profit number we did not have at that point in time. Later on we did something. Then growth in revenue, customer engagement, there's different variables that we get. Now this is what I was talking about earlier. When it comes to secondary data, you may not have a choice of selection of constant. Okay, if you do the primary data, which is basically I would have done the survey, I would have taken a much better dependent variable. But this is basically what you get in the market. So you have to work with that and convince the reviewer that hey, this is all we have, and you have to live with it, and we will try to come in between and meet you in the middle. Okay, so I will try to kind of give you some idea. And then this different digital payment technology, we took all these different digital payment technology, including credit card, debit card, prepaid card, net banking, mobile payment, UPI, M-wallet, whatever you can think of, everything came in. And then we also also say that, we created some kind of a moderators, okay, and these moderators are very interesting. This came from qualitative study. So the first one is, what we realized that we who are more likely to adopt and who are more likely to get benefit of adoption, those who have already made some investment in technology. Okay, there are kirana stores which already had a computer. For them it was easy to adopt another digital technology. So that is the easy part, which we call is spend in advertising and promotion versus technology investment. So those who have made some technology investment are better off. But that was not the variable reviewers like. They like the second variable, which is all these stores, whether they do business in credit or in cash. Okay, so most of the kirana stores, if you see, many of them do business in credit. So in the month, beginning of the month, you will give them some money, take the stuff that you want. The entire month will be on credit. Again, the beginning of the next month, you are going to get the money, right? For us, we have seen it from our childhood. For a reviewer, it will be constant. Because nobody has seen it before. And why, they were very happy with this variable, which they call average credit amount provided. Okay, this is what I was talking about when you do a qualitative research. You require to come up with a variable which reviewers wouldn't have ever thought of or wouldn't have imagined. Okay, this was that variable. When we were doing the research, we did not know. I was thinking the first variable was not more interesting. Okay, which is basically giving discount, promotion, etc. versus putting money in creating a computer, keeping a computer, etc. But reviewers found the second variable more interesting. Of course, you have a lot of these different control variables, so let it be so. So this is what the first stage regression are. Forget about it. It's a simple one. I just want to show you this particular slide a little bit more. It's basically I put all these different type of this thing, right? We have put net banking, mobile payment, UPI, this, that, everything is there. And we find a coefficient for it, right? But this table has a problem. Can you identify the problem with this table? I put all my digital technologies, I looked at performance. Performance here is revenue. And this table is a problem we did not realize when they submitted the paper. But reviewers figured it out. And they said your table has a big conceptual problem. That's what he says. Okay? And I don't know who the reviewers is, but I must thank him or her for that comment. The problem with this table is that each individual technology you have put it out there. Now let's say tomorrow a new technology comes in. What do? You put that in. Again new technology comes in. What do? You put that in. So you keep on putting these different technologies, as a result of which you will never have generalization. So they said this table itself is going to kill all the generalizable claims that you are going to make. So we realized, wow, that's a big claim. Now what should we do? The reviewer said, which was the most tough part, they said, why don't you classify this technology? Okay, now how do you classify? Okay, so now we require a classification algorithm. And if you have read papers on classification, the old papers in 70s, Selby, Hans work and all, one of the things that will say that the classification scheme has to be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, right? That's the first idea of a classification scheme. Now I don't know what is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive because I don't know what is the next technology going to come from, right? So any technology way of classifying, you will end up in trouble because it will never be collectively exhaustive. Because next technology you have not seen. Like 20 years back, if you would have asked AI, you wouldn't have been able to put it in a box. So it is not collectively exhaustive. Done. So therefore I said, hey, we need to find a way to classify from the market side. Okay, from the market side. So therefore we came up with our classification scheme, and it took me good 2 months to kind of do this. But we said that, hey, we are only bothered about two things. Okay, we are only bothered about what is the cost for retailers to adopt, and within cost, any cost can come. It doesn't have to be only financial cost. Its cost can be mental cost, relearning cost, digital utility cost, any cost that you can think of. Okay, and the cost retailers pays. Okay, and what is the value customers gain out of the technology. So if I can just put this everything in these two kind of buckets, any new technology that comes in will fall in one of these buckets. Right? Think about new technology, either it will have significant cost for the retailer or it will generate tremendous value for the customer, or both, right? So we came up with this classification scheme that became very popular. They loved it. They said, wow, you came up with a great classification scheme. Okay. I said, great. I put all my technologies on that. Now I have an advantage. Now I have an advantage because now I can club the technologies together. So I said card-based technology, account-based technology, app-based technology, social security-based technology. Okay? And even if you disagree with the classification, it doesn't matter to me now. Because I already have given you this metric to classify. You can classify the way you want, but you have a more or less idea of generalization. Now you see I am going towards generalizability more and more. So this is generalizability, that's what we did. And you will see that, you know, we ran this and then we have to form the hypothesis, forget about the hypothesis. But I just want to show, this is probably the conceptual framework that everybody was interested in. Okay? This is what you make. And we send the paper. Okay? And then the reviewers came back to us again and they say, where is your theory? I said, theory? I never thought about there has to be a theory here. I showed you what happens in the market you should be happy about. And the reviewer said, no, you have to formulate hypothesis. Now the problem is, all these things, how do you put them together in the market? Because one of the things about theory is that every element that you put in the conceptual framework should come from a single theory. It cannot come from two different theories. So I need one theory to explain everything. So what it should explain? It should explain adoption. What it should explain? It should explain credit amount provided. It should explain prioritization of technology investment. Okay? And that is the significant problem I had because I don't know which theory will fit. Then I started talking to people in management. Some of my professors in IIM Bangalore who does research on management, because management guys are apparently very good in theory building. So I started talking to them, hey, what theory? They say, hey, think about resource-based view. Can you apply resource-based? Now, resource-based view, if you know, and I assume that most of you have studied it, okay, we talk about the brain resources and all. Of course, this is a brain resource, right? If a retailer can use this and adopt this, it is a brain resource, because many may not be able to adopt it. Great, okay? Hence, performance should go up. The second one is also easy. Because this is also investment, right? This is also an investment. Because the investment will enhance the value of the brain resource or diminish the value of the brain resource. So it's an investment, so it's a brain resource. Problem was, how do you put this credit amount provided as a part of the brain framework? Okay? Then we started looking at reading a lot, and one of the things that brain framework also suggests that there are complementary resources and there are non-complementary resources. Most of the discussion in strategy and marketing was towards complementary resources, right? So that means if you have technology and if you put money in advancement of technology is great. Very rarely, marketing literature actually looks at non-complementary resources. And I have to somehow say that this is a non-complementary resource. Okay, it's non-complementary, it's an organizational policy. It's a non-complementary resource. Because once I pay you after the end of a month, right, it doesn't matter whether you have digital technology or not. The local kirana guy whose 90% business runs on credit, even he doesn't have this machine or have the UPI card, right? They will say, when you come back from office, why don't you bring the money? And you will bring the money and give it to you. But a flyby operator, somebody who runs a shop here, who doesn't have this credit system, who doesn't provide a lot of the money in credit, they require people to come and buy and go. They require more of this technology. So this is what I put, and because now I have this credit amount, right, which is basically negative, which is basically non-complementary, I have a theoretical contribution. Okay? Till now, the paper only had new stuff, never had theoretical contribution. But with this is the first time I created a theoretical contribution of the paper. And I'm going to show you how the contributions happen, okay? On the right, so the contribution. But once we did this and we sent it across the paper, and we said, hey, round 3, we are done now. The reviewers came back again. They said, we love your paper. This time we are giving you 6 months. I said, why are you giving me 6 months? I don't need 6 months. Can you show that is exactly what you are saying? It's really happened in the world. I said, how do I show it really? That means what they are asking for is causality. So can you show it causally that this is the reason it is going up and not because of anything else? Now we have a third level of the problem. How do you create it more causal? Okay? So what I did, when every door shuts, your hometown doors open. So I went back to a hometown, which most people felt throughout my life as a negative because I come from a small town. But that turned out to be a big positive because their retailers, none of them have adopted any digital technology. I said, brilliant, I got my groups. So half of the retailer I say, why don't you adopt? Okay? And other I said, don't adopt. So I have a control group and I have a treatment group. Beautiful. Now I have done it for 6 months. So I have wrote the entire paper, the section was ready. I'm just waiting for a numbers to come. Within 3 months I started getting my numbers and started showing positive impact on those who have started adopting. Then I said, hey, you see, it really happens. It really happens. This is round 4, by the way. Okay, this is round 4. Now I have shown it causally. I have shown theoretical impact. I have shown new research. All good stuff I have shown. And I said, I am done. Then they came back again. They said, all good. Very good. We are very happy. But can you tell me how many the technologies they should adopt? Numbers. Then tell me which should be, if you have to adopt only one, which one should it be? If you have to adopt 2, which 2 should be? And if you do that much, we will be happy. I said, okay, fine, we'll do that also. Okay? And therefore we start going back and start doing that also. So now we look at the paper 5 rounds, where it started and where it ended. Okay? It started with a simple idea that technology should be adopted, and we did a data set, okay, with one interview, some interviews, that is one study with interview, the second study with all this technology combined to show it. I did not see the paper what reviewers saw. Reviewers saw a paper which is not making any theoretical contribution but has potential. So they came back with all this suggestion and the paper actually started improving it every round. Now, when I wrote the final section, which is the contribution section, so this is the other one, right? How many should you adopt? It turned out you should not adopt more than 2 technologies. Okay? And this is the other one, for example. This is all robustness checks and this thing. This is another one, the idea. And this is also from reviewer side. What is the impact it creates? Now, one of the things before I talk about the contribution section, I want to highlight this because I think I have not discussed this. Now, once you do a study which is empirical in nature, this is utmost important. Okay? You have to show different alternate dependent variable where your study goes. Okay? Now today morning when I was looking at some of the papers where you have used scales, for example, right? People have used scales, right? Good, happy for you. But one of the problems that's going to happen when you use scale, there is a common method bias issue. They will eat you alive. So therefore you not only have to show the performance, if you are doing performance based, show it with scale, but show it also with data. Okay? Not only that, show it different type of performance. Okay? So we showed you revenue and they said we need profitability. I said, yeah, I may or may not have it. But I can show something else. Hey, sales per employee. I can show that. Because I have the revenue data, revenue divided by number of employees. I can also tell you sales per square feet. I also have the inventory to sales ratio. These are different alternate performance, these are operational performance matrices. I'm going to show you that, and even there, I will show you that impact happens. Now you cannot tell me that your results are only driven by because you selected a particular type of dependent variable. You're building out any performance matrices relatively similar, it will give you the result. This is basically what we call alternate dependent variable. This is part of your robustness check. One of the things that any empirical study has to be doing is to show robustness. That means it doesn't matter how I collect the data, the results are more or less similar. Okay? That is what we call a robustness check. The more robustness check we do, the better it is for you. Okay? That's one thing that one needs to do. This is a robustness check. Also, other things that you need to do in empirical studies correct for endogeneity. Okay, I know you don't have to say that this is one of the biggest things that I want to talk about. But this is something you have to do that's just to really help. Okay, this is a robustness check. I need family-owned businesses, non-family-owned businesses, synergistic effect, etc. This is the field experiment. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the contribution. Okay, and you will see that the contribution is we are going to kind of extend the literature. Okay, that's important. And I have already said in the contribution we are not going to repeat our findings again and again. So what we say that hey, we have shown that credit provided to customers is a non-complementary resource, while prioritizing technology investment leads to a complementary resource. And most of the marketing literature and literature strategy in general are focused more towards complementary resource. And this is one of the first paper which talks about the non-complementary resource. So this is the extending the literature, extending the theory. Okay. Then we have given you a classification algorithm. Okay, this is the first classification algorithm that has come into picture. This classification algorithm has the advantage that not only today, from today onwards till the world doesn't end, you can use the same classification algorithm. You don't require a second. Okay, that's we are saying a big contribution. Okay, the last three is basically, of course, for retailers, what should you do? Number one, you should adopt. How many? 2. What 2? I'm going to tell you that also. Right? If you are a retailer who operates not in credit, don't adopt. If you are a retailer who operates not only operates in a day-to-day basis cash, please do adopt. Okay? So these are actionable insights. And if you adopt, okay, how much extra money you are going to make? On an average you said, and this is basically from the field data, you are going to make around 9.6% extra. So this is exactly the impact of technology adoption. Okay, 9.6% extra. Now, if you look at the studies we have done, qualitative, which is exploratory, qualitative gave you all these different variables, cool variable, interesting variable, that people are interested in listening. Okay, then we have quantitative, which basically help you to establish the relationship. Then we did a causal, which help you to establish this is the reason why it has happened. Okay, and number 4, we have shown you the economic impact. Right? This took 5 months. This took 5 months. The paper went through. But this paper gave you a good learning. Okay? In terms of where we start. So, in terms of the problem, if you are doing a bottom-up approach, and I encourage you, I'm really going to encourage you to use bottom-up approach. Okay? Because top-down approach also I saw in one paper. But try to do a bottom-up approach. Okay? Try to go to the market. See if there is an interesting phenomena that you observe. Okay, see the impact of that phenomena. See if you can find some data around that phenomenon. For example, recently we are doing a paper which is on ASHA workers. You know ASHA workers, right? They have to help you in terms of, during pregnancy, after pregnancy, they help, right? One of the things you'll notice that Indian neonatal mortality rate is abysmal. It is comparable to Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, neonatal mortality essentially means when the baby dies 28 days after being born. Within 28 days if the baby dies, that's a technical definition of neonatal mortality. No, kids are dying and we are still, but ASHA workers are there for, donkey's age. They are here for a long time. So does it even matter to have ASHA workers or not? Now you want to argue, if you just read any literature, they will say that ASHA workers help a lot. Any literature, any newspaper articles only talk positive things about ASHA workers. The question is, the ASHA workers is such a positive intervention. Why are kids dying? Why is it not improving? That question we try to answer. And what we realize, I'm giving the gist, I've just submitted the paper. What we realize, ASHA workers do very good job when it comes on pre-pregnancy care. That means you have to make sure the mothers take certain number of injections. They will do a good job. Okay? You have to make sure the mothers go to the doctor regularly. They will do a good job. Where they fail is basically when the baby is born, if they have to judge that clinically whether the baby will survive or not. Because if the baby is not going to survive, they have to recommend the baby to a specialist, right? To a doctor, which they call special newborn care. When it comes to referral, they have a problem. It's not that they are not completing referrals. They are doing completely, but they are not able to judge whether referral, which baby to refer, which baby to not refer, because they are not clinical practitioners. So any baby you see crying, if you get scared, you refer. But that baby may not require special care. At the same time, there is other baby which requires it, but they don't know how to, whether to recommend it or not. That's where the challenge. So we said the paper referral completeness and referral accuracy. Okay? All incentive to ASHA workers are based on referral completeness, but we are saying that it should be also based on referral accuracy. How many accurate babies you have referred? Okay? And that should be the metric. And how do you make them better? We also give them suggestions. That is actually came. And we said that if you give them on-job training, okay, on-job training is the only way where they kind of become better. Okay? So this is the bottom-up approach towards research. I'm going to show you one more, which is not, these days I don't do much, but you may require it, which is a top-down approach. And top-down approach, as you know, right, very simply, it's reading literature, finding something, and then kind of say, this is very important, nobody has looked into it, I am going to look into it. Okay? So this is a top-down approach. This is from my thesis, by the way. This is my thesis paper. Okay? This is also gone through Journal of Academic Marketing Science on a special issue on emerging markets. Okay? This is another thing I am going to tell you, that if you find a special issue and if you have a paper which suits that special issue, right? Never miss a deadline. Everything else in this world, keep it aside. Go for special issues. Okay? The special issues do two good things for you. Number one, it will make sure that the paper gets completed on time. Because the deadline is a deadline. Nobody is going to wait for it. So you will complete the paper and submit it. Secondly, if there is a fit, right? Reviewers are a lot more positive to give you one chance. The first review you are going to get, if I see a fit. So generally what editors will tell me, if there is a special issue, just look in the first round, just look at the fit and see if you can fit the paper in the journal. So the first round, if you can get the fit, you are done. Okay? I published around 2-3 papers in special issue and I realized that the review process is much simpler as compared to a regular issue. Now, this is basically customer service recovery to reduce customer churn. This literature, by the way, existed for donkey's years. Okay? And there's like before when I start taking over, everybody started donkey's year. But the idea for this came in because I kept on seeing that so many these service failures keep on happening. This is from United Airlines. This fellow was traveling from Nebraska, and what happened is that the guitar got broken. Okay, by United Airlines. He wrote a song and uploaded it in YouTube. And the song became really big, and the United Airlines was struggling to kind of, and then this was a song. In India, it is very common, So rude behaviors, you are very common. In fact, this was very interesting. In Indigo, they left 14 passengers behind at Goa airport because they wanted to move quickly. Okay? So the passengers were waiting and the flight left. Okay? So service failures, by the way, are very common. Okay, you see across. What is service failure? Is not matching your expectation. You have an expectation of a service. It doesn't match. That's what we call a service failure. Now, if you start looking at it right, there is a significant impact on profitability. 64% of customers are, and in emerging markets even more, 88% of customers is related to issues related to service failure. And there is $30 billion revenue lost by Latin American mobile companies. Okay, so this is basically some data to prove that it's an important problem, huge impact problem. Again the same, I always do quantitative study, and to establish the problem is important. 90% managers say that service failure is that customer churn is problematic. Not only that, managers don't know when to use what. That is the problem. Okay? So service failure happens, what should you do? Should you give them compensation? Should you just say sorry? Should you try to fix the failure quickly? Then another question that always comes in that are all failures the same? Are all failures different? So literature in this domain, now because it's a literature issue, I'm going to argue from literature. Literature in this domain say, you look at the failure, service failure, whether it's a process failure or outcome. Now what is a process failure? So for example, somebody spoke with you, the taxi driver spoke with you rudely. It's a process failure. You are not happy about it, but the driver made sure that you move from point A to point B. Okay? So therefore the outcome is still you have reached your place, but but you did not like the way the person talked. That's a process failure. On the contrary, the cab did not come at all. That's an outcome failure. Okay? And literature is very clear. If there is outcome failure, that means if there is if the cab doesn't come, compensate. Okay? But if it's a process failure, then apologize. And the reason they say is because when there is a process failure, your psychological resources get depleted. But if it's an outcome failure, your physical resources, tangible resources get depleted. Tangible resources, tangible compensation. Psychological resources, psychological compensation. Okay? Simple. That's all it is. But what I argue in my paper, in this paper, that one of the things that is missing in the literature is this idea of resource constraint. Okay? Idea of resource constraint. Some consumers some cultures, some places, you have abundance of certain resources and less of certain resources. So for example, the emerging market, which resource is more abundant? Can you tell me which resource is more abundant? Which resource is more abundant? Which resource is more abundant? Think about it. You get it all the time. You have so much of them, you said I don't need it. Information, what else? What else is for the close? From culture side, start thinking about culture side. I argue in my paper, love is the abundant resource. Love. Love is the abundant resource. Everybody loves everybody here. Okay? You have so many family members, so many people, everybody loves you. So there's so much love available in the emerging market, it's an abundant resource. And what is a scarce resource? What is a scarce resource? What is a scarce resource? Well, loyalty is enough. Family is loyalty. What is a scarce resource? Most scarce resource. You want to emerging market. Trust. Lot of trust. Yeah, collective societies, right? Lot of trust. What is scarce? Money. Money is scarce. Money is scarce. Love is abundant. So I argue in my paper that in this particular context, in emerging market context, people will be ready to substitute one resource with another. So because I do not have enough money, any failure, doesn't matter what it is, okay? If I get a compensation, I will be happy. Okay? If somebody speaks with me rudely, and I call the company and say, this your guy talks to you very rudely, and the person said, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you 10 rupees. Okay? Ideally, what they say, no, my self-esteem is very important, this is very important. Well, yes, but 10 rupees is there, right? So that 10 rupees, consumers are more likely to pay. It doesn't happen in US, by the way. It doesn't happen in Europe. Because in that case, what will happen? Even if the cab doesn't come, what do you have to do? What do you have to do? Don't give them money. What do? You apologize. You talk to them politely. Because what is scarce there? What is scarce there? Love is scarce. Okay? What is abundant? Resources are abundant, money is abundant. So in this paper we say that even in case of process failure, in case of resource scarcity, consumers are more likely to trade resources. Okay? That's your theoretical contribution. That's your theoretical contribution. Okay? And of course you show many other stuff, but that is the entire idea. Okay? So now this is a top-down approach. Okay? This is a top-down. This is not that I went to the market, started finding out, this top-down. I went to literature, I said there is nothing in emerging market. But still this paper is a theoretical contribution. What is the theoretical contribution? What is the theoretical contribution of this paper? That people are going to trade resources. Okay, that's the theoretical contribution. This actually existed in economics for a long time. Because if you write the utility equation, right? Followed by the utility equation, you always write a budget constraint. But that budget constraint, nobody has brought it to market. Okay? So we argue in this paper that number one, that this one is a big that scarcity. Number two, we also show that among the process and outcome failure, process failure are more damning in emerging market than outcome failure. Okay? What is the outcome failure again? The outcome failure is when you don't receive the service. When the outcome is poor, right? When your call drop happens. And my advisor would always tell me, why is data showing this? I said, maybe this is because, and that is what we show in the paper, is that the next particular operator is equally bad. Right? If you take Vodafone and call it off happens, where will you go? At best you go to Jio. What happens in Jio? Again call it off happens. Then what happens? You go to Airtel. What happens? Everybody is equally bad. The outcome failure doesn't matter. Don't even think about outcome failure. Let it be so. Don't even intervene. But process failure matters. Process failure meaning somebody talking to you rudely matters. Right? Somebody giving a false bill matters. So anything which is process specific matters. And we said that even if there is a failure happens in process failure, try to kind of give compensation. So this is what we showed in this paper. So these are two papers with two different approaches, with one common trait. Both the papers have a significant academic contribution. Both the papers deals with issues which are large enough. Okay, large enough. Both the papers, you cannot a priori tell me what works and what doesn't work. Okay, you cannot tell me that. Okay, that's why it's a good paper. Or both the papers have multi-method. Okay, so there's a methodological nuance that I also bring into the paper, in both the papers. Of course, the last one was much more deeper. This was PhD work, so I was not that great at that point in time, but still an okay work, not a bad work to kind of read. So, one of the things that scholars have to understand, that number one, and I always tell my students all the time, number one, don't talk about scales, don't talk about constructs, talk about a problem. Okay? Talk about the problem. Problem that nobody has solved it before. Okay? If somebody has solved it, it is not your problem. For example, recently I was part of a faculty recruitment seminar. Okay? We rejected one candidate. The candidate's paper, okay, and don't tell this outside because the candidate may be in job market and I do not want to harm his potential to get a job. But on paper it says that if you are mindful, there is a construct called mindfulness or something. Okay, I don't know what it is. It basically means you are aware. You are aware. Basically, that's what it means. The construct of mindfulness. It says that if you are mindful and if there is a high level of mindfulness, in that case you do not do overspending on your credit card. Okay. Overspending on your credit card. That's the paper basically. Okay, so that's what you have to say. So, mindful consumers do not do overspending on credit card, and because overspending on credit cards has a lot of implications, including increase in debt, obesity, and all other stuff. So that's what we showed. Okay, and only one question I asked him at that time. I said, we know the answer to this question. What do you think the answer to this question will be? If consumers are mindful, will they spend more or less? Will they do overspend or not? What is the answer? No, they're not. Because they're mindful. That's why they're called mindful. Okay? Why did you spend 5 years doing that? It's a PhD thesis, and I don't let the candidate give me the advisor. And I told you openly, so I have no harm in saying that. I said, what the hell your advisor is doing? What is sleeping? Because I can answer it before even reading your paper, but your 5 years of work is useless. You understand that? So, although he felt bad about it, I do not want to demean him, neither is the advisor. But the challenge is true, no? That you could not figure out that the answer to the question, what you are trying to answer, can be answered without reading a single page of your thesis. That means this is not correct research. Okay? And what he was very kind enough to ask me what should I do. I said, salvage this paper.
But sir, sometimes people would argue obvious things, can you prove it? Then research is the only option.
You tell them, please prove it. I will not do it. Okay? And I'm telling you why. Who should prove obvious things? Who should prove an obvious thing? Tell me, the 1 plus 1 equal to 2. Do you know who proved it? Barton Russell. In their book called Principia Mathematica. Okay? Barton Russell is a seasoned scholar. Big scholar. So let these obvious things to be done by big names. Seasoned scholars. Let them do it. They can prove the most obvious. Okay? You have no problem. You said very good, very happy with both of them. But your paper, right, will not go through that. Right? So we have to think of that combination. So do things which are not so obvious. I would encourage you to do things which are India specific. But make it an emerging market specific phenomenon. Okay, don't say it is done in US, So we are testing in India, nobody cares in this world. Okay? So try to make it emerging market specific. Just make it test. So this is all, most of the things that I have to say. Any questions you have? Any questions? Any questions you have? If you have questions, I can take you. Any questions? One question, yeah. Any questions? Yes. So do proxies, number one, do proxies, take different proxies of the construct and show that the different proxies still works. Okay? Do that. Yeah. That will work. Alright, so I think I'm done. Okay?
Thank you, sir, for the insightful session. It's truly a pleasure to learn from you. It's time for a teamwork and networking session. Kindly head over to the designated area. We will reconvene shortly in few minutes for a session on. We'll reconvene shortly in 5 minutes for a session on writing a case study with teaching note, a beginner approach by Professor Subhadeep Arora.
मेरे ऊपर I didn't find it much.
This time I'm active with ICMM
चार प्लेटें चार प्लेटें
ये लिया हमने मैंने ट्रैक शेयर पे which is very good ऑफिस में रखने के लिए एक पैनल डिस्कशन और रेक्टेंगल वाला भी दिया वो भी अच्छा है
अच्छा वो भी है दोनों ही है
जिनने जिसे बनाया था उसको
सर्कल में भी थे तो वो भी दो और अभी महीना मोटी
एक और
बड़ा वाला चाहिए कैश
लेके जाना पड़ेगा बड़ा वाला चाहिए ऊपर रख के बांध
Good afternoon to one and all. Now we have Professor Subhadeep Arora delivering on the topic writing a case study with teaching note a beginner's approach. Professor Subhadeep Arora is a distinguished faculty member in the marketing management area at IIM Amritsar, bringing a rich blend of academic excellence and industry experience. He earned his PhD in marketing management from IIM Lucknow and has made significant contribution to research with publication in renowned journals such as the Journal of Business Research, Journal of Macro Marketing, Journal of Service Marketing, and Tourism Management Perspective. His research focuses on consumer complaining behavior and macro marketing, areas of critical importance in today's dynamic marketplace. Before joining academia, Professor Arora served in the telecom services industry for nearly 2 decades with BSNL, a Government of India enterprise. His extensive professional experience combined with his academic rigor equips him with unique insights that benefit both his research and teaching endeavors. We are fortunate to have him with us today to share his insights and expertise. Please join me in welcoming Professor Subhadeep Arora to the stage and Professor Santosh Kumar Tiwari to felicitate Professor Arora as a token of our appreciation and gratitude.
पीछे फोटो लगा सकते हैं
थोड़ा बीच में
Thank you, Professor, for your warm gesture. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible at the end?
Yes, sir.
It's difficult to kind of trying to conclude this event which we have been having for 3 days, and particularly after the session by Professor Bora. So in many ways, what I will be going to talk about would be different from what he talked about, not just from the content perspective, but also from a targeting perspective. So when he was talking about how to publish in top tier journals, case studies have a different kind of intent. Okay. Let's start with maybe anecdotally trying to set up the context. What are cases according to us? What is a case? So if we read this title, the most intriguing word perhaps is the word case itself. Any thoughts? What is a case for us?
Real time.
Real time, okay. Any other thoughts? Incident, great. So we are thinking here about exemplars, about instances of anything. So if we are talking about, let's say, for a doctor, every patient is a case. For a lawyer, every dispute is a case. For a statistician, every sample element is a case. And for a decision maker or a manager, which is our context, every decision situation is a case. But when we think about this kind of breadth, do we talk about every situation that we face? So does a doctor, let's say, hypothetically, if a doctor is trying to discuss something with a colleague or any family member, after seeing 100 patients in a day, the likelihood is that he or she would be talking about
one or two specific
some specific ideas, and that brings us to our endeavor, which is we want to talk about certain stories that are intriguing, interesting, which stick with us. So when I talk about some decisions retrospectively which I take at the workplace with my elder daughter, she is currently in her teens, the objective is to simplify something which can be appreciated by her, and to kind of, is there something else also? So what I'm trying to arrive at for all of us is some basic features of a case study. One, it is perhaps trying to simplify something. What's the another, I would say, an essential objective?
Arrive at a decision.
Arrive at a decision. So we are basically trying to facilitate the learning of someone. So guys, when we think of research, the domain which Professor Bora was talking about, both are ways to think about knowledge in a structured way. But the intent is slightly different. In an academic research endeavor, we are more about building the body of knowledge. Whereas when we talk about cases, it is more about disseminating the body of knowledge. Now it's not a very clear, strict distinction. Believe me, I mean, when we try to contradict, we would find exemplars. For example, case is also a research methodology. So these two are not distinct elements, but at a very initial level, which is the purpose of this session, we are taking a beginner's approach. It is still kind of instructive to appreciate that in a case study, our objective is to facilitate the learning of a budding manager. Whereas in research, paper or project, our objective is kind of many times create or build the body of knowledge which is there for a different audience. In this hierarchy, we tell stories. I started with this word, we tell stories that are intriguing, interesting, which stick with us. The overall endeavor, if we try to see, we want to communicate, and that's our basic need. And if you try to structure your thinking, one way which I could think of, so we have different ways. We want to a case, we have this broader intent of expression. One choice is verbal. So some part of expression is verbal. Within verbal, some part is written word. Within written word, some part is academic writing. And lastly, we have case writing. The objective of sharing this schema with all of us is the moment we go below, we are making a choice. The intent remains same, which is to put forward our point of view. Professor Bora conveyed us a different kind of way of expression. Now we are trying to think of a different way of expression. There is some restriction that we are placing. There is some legitimacy that we want to draw. So the structure which we use will try to qualify us as case writers or not. And for beginners, which all of us are, I also have a very limited experience, only 3 case studies. By the way, how many of us have not attempted writing a case study till this point of time? So all the others have already written cases in some way. Okay. So with that endeavor, we'll try to see what is the structure that legitimizes us to claim that we are in this space, while we have other options. We could be writers of fiction, we could be writers of non-fiction, but we have chosen ourselves to be in this space. And that leads me to a second kind of tendency that we have as academicians. So when we say we want to communicate, we also have a quest to know. And therein this distinction becomes appropriate, which I just discussed around 3-4 minutes before. That in research paper, the focus is perhaps slightly different, and in case writing, the focus is slightly different. We are more on facilitating the learning of someone when we are writing cases. So different ways by which managers can learn, practicing or budding managers, and we have certain ways of which case study is one. I would want some perspective from you as to why is these kind of pedagogical focus or changes becoming more relevant over time. Why are we in the contemporary times more focused on the way we impart learning? So the question is not to say that 50 years ago we were not focused on how to impart learning. We were focused at all points of time, but my view is that this focus has perhaps gained more emphasis in the past few decades. Any reasons? Yes.
Maybe because of the information age, we know that there is much information available. What extra can I do in particular?
Excellent. So yeah. So one view is that because of the information explosion and related to the point which sir is making, our attention spans have been reducing drastically. So if you look at it, just in 30 years, our attention span has reduced from 12 seconds to 8 seconds, which is even lesser than some other species. And by the way, we as human beings are believed to be a species which is more oriented towards thinking. And with this kind of a data, it's obvious that in different kind of classroom environments, the challenge of facilitating learning is gaining in prominence. So to summarize what we have discussed so far, cases try to simplify a real world situation into something that can facilitate the learning of a manager, because we are talking, our discussion is restricted to management education or business education, at least from the purpose of this session. In that space, we are trying to simplify, and we are trying to move from, guys, so one way of facilitating anyone's learning is, we talk about a concept and then give an exemplar. Here we are taking the reverse route. So we are giving an exemplar and then trying to facilitate someone to go to the concept. And with this kind of problem at hand, it is perhaps easier to appreciate which one of the two is likely to click. So from moving from the exemplar to the concept is perhaps more likely to click in today's age, and that is why we are talking about this topic in perhaps whatever time we have. So with this, I'll be zooming into the, I think we have a fair bit of agenda setting in place. So we'll try to talk now about what is case writing, some essential features of a case, and then we will try to exemplify it through a couple of cases which I have myself attempted. Not to say that those cases are very good, but because I am the kind of facilitator here, it's easier for me to talk about cases that I have written. They could be the most useless cases in the world, but then perhaps I cannot talk about others' cases with that kind of a depth as I can talk about whatever I have done myself. So first we will talk about just 5-6 essential features of a case, and then we will try to see it in the form of an example. So we were talking about this, it's a story, it's a narrative document which depicts a challenge decision situation. For beginners, and I keep on repeating, all of us are nearly in the initial phases, I mean most of us, some could have more experience. It is necessary to appreciate that cases could be written both on primary as well as secondary data. Most of the times there is this belief that we need primary firm proprietary data. Most of the times that's the belief that we initially have, but I'll give you examples where cases are written on the basis of secondary data. Acceptability could be some challenge, we may have to defend it slightly more, but then it is possible. And next, we also need to emphasize that cases are possible both in terms of real situations as well as hypothetical situations. When we think of, let's say, the domain of accounting, you would see many cases where people use hypothetical situations to facilitate or to kind of try to guide someone about how to write financial statements. So some mistakes we deliberately would plant in a financial statement and people will try to decipher what is the mistake. So that's a hypothetical situation. Again, we'll talk about it in exemplars also. We do give sufficient background to the problem. So it's not just talking about the challenge, we do give ample background, and many times we try to give some quantitative data also. Not necessary, but many times you would see some kind of quantitative data will be there. The next point is slightly counterintuitive. We would have both relevant and not so relevant data. Guys, I repeat, we are talking about first part of a case here. So the case as is recognized in academic terms is a set of two documents, a case body and a teaching note. We'll be talking about both, but first we are talking about case body. So when we are thinking about a case body, we are trying to decipher some of the essential parts of it, some of the essential characteristics of it. And when I say that we have sometimes not so relevant data in a case body, what is the reason? Why would we explicitly as authors try to include data which is not relevant? Is it audible?
Yes.
So why would we try to include data which is not so relevant explicitly as author? Yes, sir.
So that a reader may be able to distinguish between what kind of information they have to focus on.
Exactly. Anyone wants to add on to what sir is saying?
Maybe also to add a little depth to the character which we are, that he or she has a story. He's not just taking this decision today, has a background.
Yeah. So to enrich the story is one, but the first point which was made is perhaps one of the more important reasons. As managers, guys, life will not give them the luxury of specifying the data which is important. So data is a maze. As managers, people would be looking at all kinds of data, and to choose which data is relevant is also a skill that we need to cultivate in our classroom. And that skill perhaps necessitates, and I'll show you exemplars also in the couple of cases that we will use, we have data which is not so relevant. And then one of, again, very important characteristics, we do not resolve this situation for the reader. Guys, this part is the most crucial one. We do not resolve the decision of the situation. We do not give the answer on a platter. We try to keep it hanging, and that is an essential characteristic. What is the objective? The objective is to facilitate the reader to arrive at a thought process himself or herself. So that the thought process is the key. This particular decision is not the key. This particular decision is only a route to facilitate that understanding. So a few characteristics, if I repeat, it's a story, it's a narrative document. Some scholars may believe or may try to argue that we are rigorous, so why are we using the word story here? But guys, believe me, this is what all scholars learn, and I am also trying to learn. Even the most rigorous of research papers sell on the basis of the story they convey. So every method is good, but that method becomes a hygiene property. The saleable part becomes the intent or the motive that the author or the writer or the scholar is trying to convey. So you focus on the situation, and then everything else is a route to arrive at that situation understanding. It's both primary, could be primary, secondary, could be real, hypothetical. You give ample background, often with quant data, many times it's not so relevant, and you leave the conclusion open. And then the concept has to go into, we discussed there are two essential parts of a case. Case body, which goes to the student or the manager or the reader, and a teaching note which goes to the, which is only intended for the instructor. So we as authors would write both, but one part of it would be publicly available and one part of it would be restricted to facilitators. Which one of the two is more difficult to write from our perspective? Any thoughts on that?
Teaching note from us.
Again, it's slightly non-intuitive for people who have not attempted it yet. The case is a story. It has to be rich, no doubt about it. But when you talk about concepts go into the teaching note. So the example or the kind of direct parts of the issue go into the case body, and what is it that we want to facilitate or instruct is what goes into the teaching note. So let's come to examples now. At any point of time, please feel free to interrupt if you have any query. So just to set up the context a bit further, when we think about this first point here, a challenge or a decision situation, Disneyland, all of us have heard it, maybe we have not visited it, but we know what's the context. So when Disneyland opened its first park outside US in Tokyo, it was a runaway success. When it opens its second park outside US, Disneyland Resort Paris, it was a tough going. So now you see the story begins to unfold. And the context, explicit context, when you have a story which you want to tell to the reader is, now they are trying to open a third park outside US. So what is it that they should do and they should not do is something that is a story waiting to be told. Similarly, if you have, let's say, DHL, and you want to convey pricing mechanisms to a manager or a budding manager, on the surface, we all use courier services. It's just international shipping, but we know the basic contours of it. So we would tend to assume that it's a fairly simple decision. But when you start thinking about it, there are so many factors. You talk about the distance, you talk about what is the origin destination, what is the nature of shipment, is it variable, should we differentiate based on the supplier industry or buyer industry, should we differentiate on basis of volume. Again, there is a story which is waiting to be told. So I'll skip this third example and I'll come straight away to the exemplar that we will be using. So it's the context that we have all been through, COVID-19, first wave 2020. Negativity all around, insecurities in our minds, and that is one we thought perhaps there is some situation which enables us to create a story so that others can benefit from it. And the story we thought was, how are brands responding to COVID-19? And that response is not necessarily from an economic or a business perspective. So how are brands actually contributing to managing this crisis? So any action that any brand is taking, irrespective of the geographic context, how does that help in the resolution of the problem to some extent? That's the broad intent. So what I mean to say is, when we think about cases, this point Professor Saurabh was also making, any research paper, the first key criteria is what is the motive. Similarly, any case study, we need to specify in 2-3 sentences what is it that I want to speak to the reader. And that has to be brief. That should not be an essay, that has to be very brief. So if you read it, these few sentences, and I have highlighted some part in blue, we are trying to think of a broader crisis management perspective from a managerial angle, and we also want to see how brands try to intermingle their understanding of the consumer and their values to further the social marketing concept. So I won't go into depth of the meanings of these concepts, but still, just to emphasize, I repeat, we are thinking of how brands go beyond their business interest in responding to this crisis. That's the whole essence of it. So a case, when we think about it, we need to first think about what is the story, what is the motive, and then when you have this thing in place, you try to think of a vehicle, which is only a proxy, which is a route to convey that situation. And in this case, we chose a hypothetical manager in a hypothetical firm. So again, linking back to the arguments that I was making, it's not necessarily based on real data. So it's a real situation. COVID-19 is something that all brands were facing, but we chose a hypothetical firm and a hypothetical actor, and he is the CMO of a large white good manufacturer. Lockdown is there. He is concerned about not just the lockdown, but also the prolonged possible transition phase before normalcy returns. And you leave the conclusion unresolved. How are we doing it? So we leave this question hanging. How would we alleviate the insecurities and the troubles facing different kind of actors? So the firm has employees, the firm has suppliers, channel partners, and of course the broader community in which the firm lies. What is the approach that we are trying to take here? So what is it in one line that we want to convey to a budding manager here? I mean, your thoughts.
That at the end of the story there is a dilemma?
At the end of the story there is certainly a dilemma, which is a necessary feature of every case. But sir, in this context, what is the specific kind of thing that we want to plant in his or her mind based on the exemplar? So customer centricity was something which was sufficient a few decades ago or a few years ago, but now you need to have a stakeholder approach. And this one sentence captures that intent, but that will not come out till the class discussion happens and when we reveal the teaching note, when we reveal certain frameworks. So I'll come to that in a moment. What we are trying to talk about is we discuss the 4 or 5 features of a case and we are trying to think about examples. So a decision situation, hypothetical or real data, unresolved conclusion, we are leaving it hanging. Some people may say that Ashit will do this, some people would say Ashit will do that. And as an instructor, our job is to synthesize everything. And how will we synthesize that? The author of the case teaching note has to guide us in that direction. So it's not merely my capability as an instructor that would come out in the classroom. It will be shaped by the capability of the case writer. And the case writer will guide me. You may think, I may think there are 3 concepts applicable here. But I would try to be guided by the author because the author knows his or her thought schema better. So in the end it will be a mix of the instructor's view as well as the author's view. But here we are focused more on the writer view. So that is what we will try to see. And then the case goes on to give exemplars of different brands. So Lush, a UK based retailer, what did it do? Then it talks about Instagram. So all the misinformation that was flowing around, Instagram actually identified those hashtags and sources, and whenever anybody tried to click there or use that hashtag, it made the process change that they were redirected to a verified and authoritative source. Again, one of the contributions which attempted or helped to resolve the crisis. So this way the case gives multiple examples in the case body. Remember guys, we are talking about the main case body which goes to the management student or budding manager. Then we will come to the teaching mode. Example of irrelevant data. So here in this case you will see this data table. That's caused by major pandemics. Now in some ways you would argue that we are talking about a pandemic and so historical data about pandemics is relevant. But think of it, what was the decision situation here? How do I respond? How does a manager respond to this challenge posed by COVID-19 in a societal contributory way? So not just the business interest. Now this data goes much back in time. How many people died in 430 BC or 1817 BC from a different pandemic? It's a very different situation. At that point of time the context was very different. Going beyond that, even if you believe that pandemics present similarities, remember, if you go back, our objective in this case was to adopt a broader crisis management perspective. So COVID-19 is just an exemplar. We are thinking about how to resolve or how to address crisis situations. So that is why this becomes even more irrelevant. Again, we have already tried to discuss why do we put it if it is irrelevant, and I won't extend that argument further. I just wanted to give an example of the same. Now let's come to the teaching note. In a teaching note, guys, again some essential characteristics. First and foremost, think about the perspective. The case body was written from the perspective of the
Student or
The case body was written from the perspective of the student or the manager. The teaching note is written from the perspective of the
instructor.
instructor or the facilitator. So we have to keep it in mind right from the first step. We are talking about the perspective of the concepts to be shared, and there are some essential elements. So these are like norms that we follow in a teaching note. We give a small synopsis of the case. We give learning objectives. What is it that we are trying to facilitate? We also map it to possible courses. So if I am talking about COVID-19, then it is possible that it can be taught in an introductory management, marketing management course or strategic management course. Or is it relevant to electives? We will try to map that. And we also try to give a session plan. Many times you also see a board plan. So if we have 3 blackboards in a class, how should the instructor use the different boards to illustrate? Even that detail is sometimes given. The most important thing is what should be the flow of discussion. What are the different threads? And that is where the richness of the teaching note lies. Each of the threads, guys, we need to position certain relevant theories or frameworks. Again, we will talk about exemplars. So if you look at it, we try to talk about learning objectives. Any number here? Any number that we can think of that this is perhaps a recommended number? How many learning objectives?
4 to 5.
So 3 to 5 generally. 4 would be a more acceptable figure. 3 to 5 generally is what we take. Then we tell us what is the course. We give some additional readings. Irrespective of whether people would read it or not, from an author's perspective, it's essential to place the case in some broader schema. So you give some relevant readings, and we also, as I was discussing, we try to talk about certain questions, which is the flow, which is the structure of the discussion that we are trying to proactively give from our side. Again, this is an author's view. So an instructor may change it, swap it, could make certain changes, but the author gives a recommendation and the author gives a session plan, divides the time. Irrespective of the format, guys, where we submit, we do follow these kind of schema to again legitimize it as a teaching note component of a case study. Now let's go to the more important part, which is about the concept of the framework. So if you look at it, this is what I have drawn directly from the teaching note. You see 3 frameworks on this slide, and I'll start with the first one, the marked one. Remember, one of the learning objectives was to think about what is a crisis. So COVID-19 was just an exemplar. What is a crisis? And in that respect, you try to guide the budding manager or student about what are the different kinds of classifications that are available on crisis, and from there make some sense of what is the exact situation we are facing. So one, remember, a general view that we had earlier was that adversity is either natural or man-made. What is the more contemporary view? So I repeat, a general view that we have always had in humanity was that disasters or adversities is either natural or man-made. What's the contemporary view?
It's hybrid.
It's mix
The
of both.
contemporary view is that even when we think about the Uttarakhand flood, the cloud burst, etc., many of us would argue that it is the indiscriminate level of development that we are pursuing a model which is leading to it. So in a way, it is becoming hybrid. That's the first illustration that the teaching note gives. Then it moves on to trying to define it even further, which is all adversity attributable to internal reasons is many times called a crisis, whereas all adverse situations attributable more to external reasons are called disasters. Again, this is an understanding that you try to impart to the audience. And then you go even richer, which is to say that when as a manager we face adverse situations, we think about how predictable it is and how influenceable it is. From where do we draw these frameworks? From where, as an author, from where do we draw this kind? From what is the source of this?
Management literature.
Again, literature. So a research paper would become the source, and that is why even while writing cases, we cannot ignore the research volume or research body that has been there in this domain. But the kind of rigor that would be required is lesser. In a research paper, people would question why you chose this framework and not the other one. In a case study teaching note, that rarely would happen. Some reviewer may give a suggestion, but then that suggestion will not be a make or break for your acceptance. You can still argue that this is what I believe is more reasonable, and that argument is more likely to be taken on its face value. So this was one. Then in the same context you try and you give another structure to the audience, which is all the exemplars that we had in that case in terms of brand reactions. We categorize them. Some of them try to stop fake news from spreading. Some of them cushioned the blow. For example, Facebook helped suppliers, smaller suppliers that was cushioning the blow. Some people started repurposing their textile factories into PPE kit manufacturing facilities. So that's an example of repurposing to contribute and so on. The intent is now systematize it for the reader, so that he or she can put a new action that is coming to mind into some structure. And then you keep on doing it. You try to, remember I used the word stakeholder, so now you try to teach the manager, prospective manager, that stakeholders are in 3 buckets. You have your own internal managers, employees, we have our suppliers, buyers, partners, competitors. We also have media, government, NGOs, which are kind of the external community. What is the benefit of this structure? Now when Ashit, who was the hypothetical manager in this case, when he tries to generate a list of possible actions, this gives him a check mark. So go back once you have decided and try to see whether what you have planned maps to your intent. It's not necessary that he focuses on all the 3, but still it is important because he has the choice of looking it back again. I wanted to emphasize this, but are my actions reflecting this intent? So you have a check schema. And lastly, you also guide, this teaching note also try to guide managers that whenever we think about responding to a crisis, we could have either of these 4 mental models. So we could be reflexive. I am a part of this community. Sir is sitting in front of me. If I see something unfortunate happening to me, it would be a natural reaction to help. So that is reflexive. A firm is a part of an institutional setup. Howsoever free the market is, government still has a role to play. Regulators still have a role to play. So if I am addressing COVID-19 because of pressure of the government, then it's institutional, instrumental. I do it because I believe that is the best way for my long-term growth. Then it is from an instrumental or a selfish kind of a perspective. And lastly, I respond in positive ways because I believe that's the right thing to do. So again, from an ethical or moral point of view. These things again give the manager a sense that what is, now with this kind of an understanding, does it remain specifically focused on crisis? Guys, request to you think about it. So when we have thought about these different lenses, does it remain merely a response to crisis?
No.
Now you can take it in any direction. It is corporate social responsibility in general. It's CSR in general. So if we have time as instructors, we can extend this thought, which was, the root was Ashit. Even at another level, the root was COVID-19. At a third level, the root was crisis. But what is it that we are trying to guide? We are trying to guide about overall social responsibility, which is there, which is relevant even when the crisis is not in presence or existence. So you extend it this way. Any questions till this point? And please someone also guide me about the time. Almost?
Yes.
Almost up. 1?
5 minutes.
What is the exact time?
Since 1:20.
1:20. So I'll try to wind up in 5 minutes. Couple of exemplars. The second example again is something, but before I go to that, I'll also try to give you, or try to show you, demonstrate how do we talk about converting a case study to something broader. Because this particular context is what we use. So we were talking about this case where we wanted to teach managers as to what is the meaning or what is the possible response to a crisis, and from there we wanted to build CSR, corporate social responsibility, different actions. So on the top is the case study that we attempted, and then we also try to broaden it into a research paper. Guys, the intent you see, the transfer, you go from here, you are changing brand word to for-profit firms. You are changing a marketing perspective to something broader, but your emphasis broadly remains the same. So we are still talking about role of for-profit firms in disaster management, but now as I'll try to show you, the rigor, the foundation, the comprehensiveness increases. It's the same domain, same topic, same focus, but you will see a change in perspective. So the top one was the case which we just saw, and this second one is a research paper that we tried to do, which was eventually published, and I'll try to show you the differences. So in a case, we moved from concept to exemplar or exemplar to concept.
Example to.
So in a case, we move from exemplar to concept, but in a research paper, we will be taking a reverse direction. So we will have to recognize the literature and the body of knowledge first, and from there we will try to draw certain further. So this is a broader kind of classification that emerged out of the paper. See, the three actions are still the same as they were in the case, but now you have sub buckets which are much more in number, and another difference is there we had 5 buckets: stopping fake news, cushioning the blow, which were anecdotal, which were not framed in the form of a concept. Here you have categories which are theory driven, which are conceptual, and this is the result of a structured literature review, a structured theoretical review which leads to these categories. And how do we intermingle the two? So we again go back, we again try to define these categories, and see this definition which is in third column is also based on the literature. And then you follow it up with practical exemplars. So for all these actions, sub-actions, the response that a firm is giving, what is the name of the firm, multiple firms, what are their sectors, and again certain references. So you see the same topic which is trying to be explored, but from a case perspective the outcome was highly different from a research paper perspective. It is, the process is slightly different. So because of lack of time I'll stop here. I had another exemplar which was about another case that we attempted on HDFC Life, which is on complaining, but I think I may have been able to convey some at least beginning idea of how we approach the topic of case writing. So thank you all, and if there are any questions, please feel free. I'll be sharing the slides with all the conference participants through the organizing committee. So if anyone wants to have a kind of review or any kind of feedback or any kind of queries, please feel free to keep in touch.
Thank you so much, sir. It was indeed an enlightening session. I request everyone to move towards FF01 for the closing ceremony.
Thank you for the presentation. अगर दोनों साथ में चला तो निकलेंगे।
हाँ ये ले जाओ।
Related to